Before I started maintenance on my Mercury XR6, I wanted to get some advice from a really good mechanic so I didn't make any screw-ups. So I ran down the best mechanic I know. It's Scotty Beatty, also known affectionately as Scotty B by the Bassmaster pros. He's a field service engineer for Mercury, and one of his duties is being on the support crew at the Bassmaster tournaments for Mercury Motors. So I ran him down at a Bassmaster tournament at Smith Lake and asked him what I should do to maintain this motor and any outboard, really.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Let's talk about your 1999 Mercury 150 XR6. It's a great motor, great platform, but you have to, a couple things that you need to do to it to make sure it has good running quality. Number one, you want to change the water pump impeller. To cool the engine, very important.
It's recommended that you replace the impeller and work on that water pump every couple of years. This is your impeller. You can see it's got rubber arms, and this thing fits inside this housing. It's a very tight fit, and the arms actually bend over to create a really tight fit, and it will drive that water through your cooling system in your outboard. The only thing is you have to drop your lower unit to get to this thing, to the water pump. It's really not hard to do, but if you're not mechanically inclined or you're not sure of yourself with this, I'd go ahead and have a mechanic do it, a marine mechanic. As for me, I'm going to do it myself. I'm not a mechanic or an expert on anything, but I'm just a guy that's trying to keep my bass boat running on a low budget. Now I trimmed the motor up so it'll be easier to get to the bolts I need to get the lower unit off. Some of the nuts are in tight spots, and you'll have to use an open-end wrench to get to them. Okay, I'm going to break this loose, and she's ready to come out of there. Alright, just ease her straight on out. The speedo tube on this motor was cut off, so I didn't have to disconnect it. You may have to do so. Okay, as you can see, I got the lower unit off. I've stood it up so you can see what we're doing, and we have four nuts we have to take off of there. So this is our water pump housing right here. Let's get it off of there. Alright, I got my nuts and my bolts off of here, those 4 nuts and bolts. Now I should be able to break this loose and pull it straight up off the shaft. Come on, baby, move. There we go. Up she goes. Okay, let's take a look at the old versus the new impeller while the impeller's still in the old housing. See how it's curved over? That's what happens when it gets in there. And look how much more this one is bent over than on this side. Okay, we got 3 gaskets we have to remove. I've already got part of this first one. Then we have an aluminum gasket here. Oops. This is extremely important. I'll explain why in a minute. Let's take that off. And then finally, here's the bottom gasket. Okay. The reason this pin is so important is because that catches a slot in your impeller, and that is what makes it spin. If you lose this piece, this won't spin and you won't get any water pressure, so make sure you don't lose this. Okay, the next step is to replace the gaskets with the new gaskets. I've already got the base gasket in right here. Next comes the aluminum gasket, and then we have the final gasket that goes on top. Okay, here we go, looks good. There, now good. Our next step is to put the pin that turns the impeller in place. What you do is you put a little bit of grease on that to hold it in place. And now I'm going to slide it down so that it lines up with that pin and slide it on there. There we go. Okay, we've applied grease to the impeller and to the inside of the housing. And the way to make this seat is to apply pressure downward on the housing while turning the prop shaft clockwise. That should bend that impeller so it goes in there. There we go. Okay, first we're getting our washers on there. And always start these nuts by hand so you don't strip anything. Gradually tighten the nuts down, going crossways, so the gaskets seat properly. Now the connection inside the upper part of the engine for the water pump fits right in here. But in order to guide it in here, the lower unit gets too close. You can't fit your hands in there to guide it. So this piece right here just acts as a guide so you can get the connection started before you actually bolt up the lower unit. So this is very important. That's what this is for. This is actually where the water goes up into the engine and it has to feed into that tube that I put on the water pump. As you can see, I've removed the cowling from the engine. I've also removed the cover that goes over the flywheel so I can get access to it. Another thing I've done is I've disconnected the battery so this thing can't start. The reason I've done that is because as I push the shaft up in the motor from the lower unit, it may not line up right. The gears may not line up right. So that allows me to move the flywheel and turn things so they'll line up right. So, all right, we've got this water pump ready to go. Let's see if we can get this thing up in there and button it up. Now bear in mind that every outboard is different. They all employ a similar impeller system in the water pump, but the parts and the procedures are going to vary somewhat between the brands and models of outboards. So we'll slide in. Remember, this is the thing that lines up. There we go. Now, if it doesn't go all the way up in right away, you may have to turn the shaft, which is what I'm going to do. Well, that seems to be going better than I thought it would. Now I've got to line up the gear, the shifter. If I can get that lined up, we'll be ready to go. It's almost in there. Oh, I think I got it. All right. Oh, we got her started. We're in good shape now. All we have to do is button her back up, get the bolts in there, and we'll see how we did. All right, I got my water running. You can hear it going on here. Let's start it up and see how we did.
Check your thermostats to make sure there's no obstructions or debris.
Okay, this Mercury XR6 has two thermostats. Has one right here and another one right here. So I'm going to show you how to do one, and you ought to be able to figure out from there how to do the other one. So you have two bolts you have to get loose right here. Where's one? And number two. Okay, there's the old thermostat right here. It just pops right out. The old thermostat has a little rubber sleeve on here that we're going to have to put on the new thermostat. So let me show you a little closer how that works. Here I'm removing the sleeve, actually a gasket from the old thermostat. And here's what it looks like on the new thermostat. We removed the rubber sleeve from the old thermostat and we put it on the new one. Now what to do is just pop it right back in here, right back in that hole, and then we just button her back up. Okay, we got them threaded in by hand, so now we just tighten them up a little bit. Snug one and the other. Okay, and we're done. We got the new thermostat in. Do the same thing on the other side. When you get them in, it's a good idea to put the muffs on the engine and start it up, and make sure there's no leakage around here. Make sure you got everything tightened up so it works just the way it's supposed to.
By the way, spark plugs. Make sure you change them regularly or pull them and check them. You'll tell by the way it burns how the plug looks if the engine's running properly. And one other thing is we want to talk a little bit more about was the gear lube. For you guys that run a lot, high performance running with these bass boats, and you want to change your gear lube sooner than later. You want to change it 25 to 30 hours on a religious basis on it. That'll keep your lower unit fresh, clean, and the bearings good.
Now, replacing the spark plugs, that's a pretty straightforward operation. If you're not comfortable changing spark plugs, then you shouldn't be doing anything under the cowling of the motor or any of that water pump stuff I was showing you. Just take it to a marine mechanic and have them do it for you. The thing you want to make sure is you get the plugs that are the right ones for your specific motor, which I have done. But the only advice I can really give you on changing the plugs is always start these things by hand. Never use a wrench. The last thing you want to do is strip the threads in the head of your engine. Then you're going to have a major problem, and that's the last thing you want. To change the lower unit gear case oil, you have to back out 2 screws. You have one here, and you got one down here. You need to take both of them out so the lube will come out of there completely. So let's start with the top one. And now for the one down here. Of course, you want an oil pan down here to catch the oil. Okay, there we go. Now, as this is draining out of here, I'd say give it maybe 30 minutes. You want every bit of the oil to drain out of there. I'm also going to replace the gaskets on these screws. All the oil has drained out of the lower unit, so now it's time to put some new oil in there. You can get a kit that has a pump that really helps you do this at your marina. And you just put it in the bottom hole, and you need to leave the top hole open. And you pump very slowly, and you want to pump slowly so that the oil gets into every nook and cranny, into every gear in there, without leaving any air spaces. So you want all oil and no air. So just take your time pumping it in, and you keep pumping until oil starts to leak out the top. Then you know it's full. So we're just going to keep slowly pumping it in until that happens. Okay, the oil. Okay, see, the oil has started to come out of here. Now the tricky part comes trying to get this in here before too much oil leaks out. So try to make a quick switch. Now you noticed it wasn't quite as smooth as I would like, and I lost some oil. So after I tighten this up, what I'll do is I'll put some oil in the top and fill it up to the brim. To make sure we get all the oil in there, if full, we'll just put this in the top and pump oil in until it runs out again. Make sure we get our full right to the top. I'd say that looks pretty full. Okay, there you go. She's locked in there. You got fresh oil in, and you're good to go for another 30 hours or so.